Okay, so I'm Chelsea and from the Make It Fox, and I was asked by a few of you to put together a tutorial on how I make my resin filled earrings. Here's a couple of examples. So this is one right here. You can see I did some white as well as a coral with a little bit of white mixed in there. This one is a green. This one, again, the spaces are a little smaller, so we'll talk about how you can do that a little bit easier to get into those small spaces. And then here's another one. It's a really pretty orange. I'm excited about that one for the fall. And so a couple of quick tips. You can see this one is actually made out of walnut. When you're doing your cuts for your earrings, one thing that's going to make a big difference on how well they pour is going to be the type of wood that you use. I have a couple, and I'll show you on here that this one is an example that were made with a softer wood. These were made with alder, and I also tried some with ash. Both of those are really soft woods, and because of that, they're not very dense, and you end up getting some seepage into your wood. So the color sort of seeps in. Even with that nice char you get on the inside, like you can see on this one, even with that nice char, it still seeps into the wood sometimes, and you'll end up with color in the edges of your wood, which when you're doing an earring like this one, you'll really be able to see it around those edges. And so even if you sand it, it's all the way through the wood. So if you're doing a softer wood, you're gonna wanna make sure that you use a sealer. So for example, this is a pair I went ahead already and they're on the tape. You can see they're double masked. So there's masking on the top here, and they're also masked on the back. I left that on there. And I actually took these outside and I used a clear spray, just a clear acrylic sealer. And I was able to spray some light coats that get down into these cracks. And what that's gonna do is really help seal that part of the wood so that the color doesn't seep into it as much. Since I started doing that, I haven't had any issues with it seeping into the wood and leaving the color like around the edges of the wood. And so the only issue I have found with that is because the sealer gets onto the tape as well, it does tend to leave a little bit more residue on the back side of your earrings where the resin is. So like on this back side here, that you do have to clean off. But that's really minimal compared to having to completely trash a pair of earrings because the color seeped into it. If you are using a harder wood, for example, like this is actually a walnut. The walnut has become one of my favorites because it is really dense. And because it's so dense, I really have never had issues with color seeping into the edges of the wood. The only issue I have had with those, however, is that is seeping through the back. And so sometimes what'll happen is it'll seep through that paint or the tape edge. Having the double masking actually really helps with this, which is one reason why I double mask and not only mask the front. Because then when I peel this off, some of that extra around those edges here will actually peel right off with your masking. But again, to really try and even avoid that completely, because that's not, excuse me, that's not ideal. You want to make sure when you're putting them on the tape that you are really burnishing it down really well. So I'm going to show you, I've done 2 of the pairs that I'm going to do today already onto the tape. So I've already done those 2. I just use regular, this is just Scotch shipping heavy duty tape. The heavy duty, sorry about that, has a little bit stronger grip on it. And so I do like that better. I'm gonna go ahead, I'm gonna be doing these as well today. These are I believe these are walnut. I'm gonna be honest, I don't know for sure, but based on the edging, I'm pretty sure that these are walnut. So you can tell the edging on these is much lighter, and that's because those are made out of alder. So I'm just gonna put these on here. And you wanna leave a little bit of space at the edges. One thing that becomes really difficult, it's gonna sound kind of silly, but moving them around is really difficult to do without messing it up. So I always do a little tab. I fold over and put a little tab on the end right here. And it might seem like something small, but it's one of those little tips that makes a big difference because you can easily slide them and move them around as you need to while you're working, without lifting them up and that kind of thing and getting them caught. Also, try to do these with just like at the most one pair on a thing of tape. If you have all of them on one big long piece of tape, which I have done, it's actually becomes a little bit more difficult trying to maneuver them around without messing up the ones you've already poured. So with that being said, I'm gonna go ahead and mix up my colors. I already mixed up my resin because this isn't a resin mixing tutorial. And you can see I have it in just Dixie cups, as usually I measure it in little measuring cups and I mix it and pour it into these. They bend really well, so it's easy to pour into those smaller spaces. And so I'm actually gonna do 3 colors today because I really wanted to do the flowers and something fun and bright. They're for my niece, and she loves a pretty pinkish purple kind of color. And so I'm gonna do a pink for those. I'm gonna do a blue for the dolphins, and I'm gonna do a green for these. And then I'm also gonna do these. I'm gonna show you, these were just engraved. I didn't actually go all the way through on these, and they're walnut. And so we're gonna actually try just pouring right into this section here, a nice thin layer, and see how those turn out. All right, so like I was saying, I pushed these on, but I forgot to go through and do all of the other stuff. When I do these, I flip them over and I really go through and make sure that I am burnishing these down really well, pushing down all on those edges. You can use like a credit card, even something as simple as like a colored pencil, to just really go back and forth along that and get it as flat and as tight on here as you can. One thing that I do that's also a little bit different when I'm doing the pours versus if I'm just pouring regular earrings in a mold, is I prefer to use acrylic paint to do my color. And this goes against what some people think. I just use, this is actually like one of the cheapest ones, the Top Notch brand, but it colors really well. It gives you a nice, mostly opaque, depending on how much you put in. You can get it opaque, but you can also get it where you have just enough light that comes through. It's really pretty. So I use this one. I have some that are the apple barrel as well that are also not very expensive. But I tend to prefer that over something like this, which is actually made for resin. And the reason I do that is because the acrylic actually makes it, the acrylic paint actually makes it a little bit thicker. And the reason I like that is because then I don't have to worry as much about it leaking through. So the paint being a little bit thicker keeps that from being as much of a problem. I know most of the time, like if you're pouring into a mold, you want it to be really flowy. So people don't want it to be super thick. However, like I said, if you're pouring into an earring like this, you want it to be a little bit thicker to keep it from seeping underneath of your, there we go, underneath of your mold. So that's another thing I do just to keep it from seeping underneath. So I'm gonna go ahead and just mix these guys up real good. Let's see. You do have to really mix well when you're doing the acrylic because if you don't, you'll get like little pockets of pigment. So you definitely want to mix them up really well. Your set time with these is definitely shorter, however, when you're using the acrylic paint. So they do set a little bit quicker than if you're using the other pigments. So that is something to keep in mind. I try not to do a lot, to mix up a lot of resin at a time when I'm doing it like this, because it will get set and be thick, which again, we want it to be thick, but you don't want it to be so thick that it can't get into those little small crevices. And we want it to level out and do its thing. The resin I'm using is Amazing Clear Cast. I like this resin, one, because it's a 1-to-1 mix ratio, but also because it is a coating and casting resin. So I don't have to use 2 separate resins for coating and casting. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead with the dolphins, mainly because they have some smaller areas in there. So I don't want my resin to be too thick. So I want it to go in there nice and smooth. So I'm gonna zoom just a little bit in on these guys. All right. Like I said, I tend to use these cups. One, because I hate cleaning silicone cups. I know that they're fantastic and they are more eco-friendly, and I get that, but they are also a pain in the behind if you are having to clean them. So one thing with these being masked that's really nice is you don't have to stress that much if you get a little bit on your edges. Because when you pull off that masking after it sets, then it'll come right off with the masking. So I'm gonna do a little drip right in there and it'll settle out. I'm gonna go ahead and pour this guy. Woo, that was a little fast. There we go, it's coming along. So it will settle itself into those areas on its own. But I do like to sort of help it along a little bit there, just like that. And then you'll see it starting to settle into its cracks. It's up to you how full you want to make these. I like them to have a little bit of that dip, but remember that the resin's going to shrink up a little bit as it sets. So you want to do probably a little bit more than what you want. Some people like it to sort of mound over the top. That's totally fine if that's how you like it. But I do find the best way, once I get all of the little parts filled in, excuse me, is to just use a toothpick and gently add just a drop or two at a time. Let it settle out and then add more. Because if you never know for sure. And if you add too much, it's really difficult to get the resin back out. All right, so those look good. I'm gonna leave those like that for now. I do have some extra. And so one thing that I always do, because I always make too much, I always make sure I have a mold nearby and handy because of that extra. And generally what I'll do is I fill the ones that are like these, just the little small round ones, because I'm able to actually mix these with round pieces of wood or different shapes, and I actually make other earrings using those and mix the resin in the wood that way. All right, so we're gonna slide this over. Again, notice the tabs make it so much easier. Make sure you're on a good flat surface. We're gonna go ahead and pour the pink. And you can tell it's already starting to get a little bit thick. Again, I'm not super worried about that. For this one, I'm gonna just kind of go into each of the little leaves areas. It will fill out on its own some, but it's never a problem to help it along a little bit. I fill in this guy. And it can be frustrating because sometimes you really want to go faster, but it is good. You don't want to pour too much in at a time. Like I said, it's easy to add more. It's really a big pain to try and take some out. So you can see it's already starting to settle pretty nicely. I can see some spots over here where I need to add more, like in here, to really get it into that corner. And it will self-level, which is nice. It'll go in by itself. I try not to force it too much. I know some people take, and you can kind of push it a little, but be careful doing that because that's a really quick way to get bubbles down on that back side of it. And I hate when I get bubbles like that because you can see them when you're doing earrings like this that are see-through a little bit. You know, they can see the back side. The bubbles really become more obvious. So the more translucent it is. So again, I'm just going to go through, and you can see as I'm putting it in there, it is leveling out nicely. And again, I'm not super worried if I get little drips on the masking because that's going to come off once everything sets. There we go. All right. And so those are my pink ones. I may, after it settles for a minute, excuse me, I may go back and add a little more. Also keep baby wipes handy. I have a little drip on my paper, and you can just wipe those right up with your baby wipes. Those are one of my favorites, the cheap ones. Before I move on to the next one, this is, I know some people use like blow torches and all these fancy things. I actually just use one of these lighters, one of the Snoop Dogg, Martha Stewart lighters. It's long enough that I don't burn myself and enough that I can get the bubbles out. I can just run it along the top. Don't stay in one place too long because you will burn the masking tape. But this will get all those little tiny bubbles out. There we go. All right, I'm going to slide these guys over a little bit, and I want to try, again, I actually haven't done this before. This is going to be a new one for me, doing these guys. And I'm curious how it's going to look. I'm going to try it with green. I know the green's going to be a little dark, but I think it's going to look really pretty up against the walnut. So I'm going to just mix my green up really, really well. And these are not masked, so I am going to try to be a lot more careful because there's no masking to make sure that I don't get it on the edges. So let's see here. I'm going to start with this guy, and I'm just going to pour it right into the middle and just around a little. This is where this self-leveling feature really comes in handy. But it's very thin. There's not a big lip on here. So I don't want to pour too much. I don't want it to overflow. And it looks like, probably because there's ridges, it's hard to see, but you know how when you when you engrave something, you kind of get those little lines in there. So I am going to just sort of push it around a little bit. I think that's what's keeping it from moving out too much. Once you hit those edges, it'll start to spread itself out. Just kind of you have to get it to touch those edges a little bit. I probably should have put these on tape because I can see it's moving around a little bit while I do this, but hindsight's 20/20. All right, so while I'm doing this, I probably am going to get a little bit, knowing myself, up onto these edges. I'm going to do my best not to. But one thing that's nice is you can sand these down a little bit. I've had a few pair where I've gotten it up there where before I started masking as much as I do now. And I discovered that with a little Dremel, you can actually get nice and tight right up to those edges, and you can sand any of those little small pieces off of there pretty easily. And just do it before you put on any stain or any like oil sealer. A lot of the time I actually just use linseed oil depending on the wood and the look I'm going for. And the linseed oil darkens it up a little bit and just gives it a really nice hard finish. So, all right, so here's that guy. I did pretty good. I don't think I actually got very much on the edge, just in like one little spot there. Do this guy. And so what I'm going to do, this is how you start it, but obviously I've got to let the resin sit for 24 hours. So this will get you started, and then I will add another video tomorrow showing how I get all the masking off and clean them and pretty them all up to use and put all the findings and everything on so that you end with a really beautiful set of earrings. And the other thing that's fun with these is they really do become, you know, each one is unique, even if you use the same cuts, just because your colors are different. Even, you know, every time you make a new set of colors, it's going to be a little bit different. It's going to be a little different shade. Sometimes you can drop other colors in here and mix them in. I've done that with a lot of those, especially like a little bit of white. You could put a little bit of glitter, like a really fine glitter. Looks nice in these. The chunky glitter you can use, but it really stands out and looks big because they are, again, kind of transparent. So it kind of makes a dark spot there when you see them through the light. So I like the little glitter better just because, excuse me, because it does give you, I'm going to slide those guys over, let them set for a minute. Because in this kind of earring with that transparency, the glitter, the fine glitter really shows up better. This one you can see a little bit in here where I put little drops of white in there, and then I just took and swirled it just gently a little bit with a toothpick is all I used for that one. So I'm gonna go ahead and pour this last set. I did want to show you, one thing on these. So these are a lot smaller lines that I'm gonna be trying to fill. Sometimes I'll just fill the bigger, like the big inside part. I just get a scoop of this, and the thing to remember is that this is masked. So again, all of that little bit that's on the edges is not gonna make a big difference. It's all gonna peel off. So even though it looks like, I put this huge blob, whoop, well, that blob went on the outside. I'll clean that off in a minute. Even though it looks, again, kind of a bit scary to put these big blobs in here, it's not a big problem because we're gonna take all that masking off. This one you do have to do a little bit more, kind of pushing your resin where you want it. I probably should have done this one after the dolphins, just again because of those little small parts, and it would be a little flowier, but it'll still work. And again, I'm just gonna drop some in here. These you have to really be careful about your bubbles because you are kind of pushing your resin into those areas. So you kind of want to just wiggle it around to help any of those bubbles come up to the surface. Slide this back down a little bit for you. I'm going to do one more side here. And then I'll end the video today and I'll finish these up off camera. And like I said, this is it's a fun technique. You can have so many variations. You can take one wood design and just make so many different fun color combinations based on seasons or for holidays. I could easily make this into a fun Christmas one if I wanted to add some red, like in here, maybe some white in there. So you can really take one fun wood design and make it work, and make lots of fun variations. So I'm gonna slide that off there so it doesn't get into the middle part. All right, and so that's pretty much it. Like I said, I'll do the rest of this pair off camera for you guys to see. And I will make another one tomorrow showing taking off the tape after everything's cured up nicely. I'm gonna get some of this. If you do get some over the edge like this, like I did right here, generally I just take as much as I can. I wipe it use a toothpick, get as much of it off. The less there is, the better, because then it'll be easier to clean off. a little bit of residue is easier to clean off than a whole big chunk. So, and again, baby wipes are going to be one of your best friends when you're doing this kind of thing. Just slide that across here. All right. So that is it. I hope this gets you guys started on this fun journey. Like I said, I love doing these. I love the variation and all the fun things you can do with it. So enjoy, and I will see you tomorrow for the second half of the video. Again, my name is Chelsea with the Make It Fox.